And so when I'm hearing conversations, I legitimately like try to put my laptop away. I put my phone away. I put any of the distractors away because even losing a microsecond of the conversation means you run the risk of losing a massive potential.
Hi, I'm Debra, an executive coach, consultant, and the founder of Do Better. After years of leading in education, often in spaces not built, I now support others doing the same, especially women of color who are leading, healing, building, and figuring it out as they go. This is Do with Debra, real talk about legacy, leadership, healing, and courage to lead shrinking. We are all navigating so much, and we're still showing up. This space is here to remind you that you are already enough. Welcome back to Do Better with Debra. Today, I get to talk to my dear friend and colleague, Rudy Elizondo. We worked together for a few years. He was in his role as Chief Equity Programs Officer, and I was Chief Equity Programs Officer. We come from very different systems, Rudy with a deep experience in K-12 charter school systems, and me bringing years of experience in colleges and universities. And somehow, we built a partnership that really worked. When I think about Rudy and me and our partnership, it is rare because it was one that was built without ego. Rudy leads with a lot of generosity in the heart. And that kind of leadership is really rare. Rudy is now the Chief of Education at College Track. And in this episode, we get into what generosity and leadership really looks like, collaborating across differences, moving past imposter syndrome, and leading in a way that matters more than titles. Let's get into it. I'm so excited to get to pelt you with a whole bunch of questions today. It's like old times. I've been really reflecting because I'm coming up on my 3-year anniversary, and I'm curious to know. Okay, obviously, you notice I'm a Black woman, so there's that. But I had talked about coming to Alliance in a broken place and not wanting to be harmed here again. I was very honest with all of you about that. I'm curious about how you welcomed me, right? It felt like you really understood me right from the get, and that you created space for me just to be myself. And I felt very safe with you. How did you do that? Why did you do that? Did you even realize you were doing that for me?
Yeah. I don't know that it was intentional, if I'm honest with you, Debra.
Mm.
I think part of your experience coming in is a lot of what I observed with a lot of people coming into not just Alliance, but in different organizations where there was almost a shyness that comes with it that I think actually minimized people's brilliance. And, I can definitely resonate with that feeling as well going into spaces because, your background is different, you look different, your degrees are different, right? Your age is different. Like there's always some variable in spaces that I observed either myself or others come in where it feels like that difference more than what that person is bringing to the table. And I think the impact of that, honestly, is you take away the opportunity to kind of magnify your impact when you're actually partner with people together. So I could say there's some subconscious elements of that for sure in welcoming you. But what I will say, and these aren't my words to be clear, I actually leverage a lot around Lencioni's research. One of the things that she says not in the Practice Functions, but somewhere else, is that when you're looking for people that are going to be the best team players, look for 3 characteristics. You look for humility, are they able to be humble? Because the humble person understands that a team's success is above their own ego. And they're not really looking to seek credit. They're actually looking to uplift others so that, both others and the work can really shine. He talks about people being hungry and hungry people are generally very self-motivated and driven to take initiative in the work and constantly go above and beyond, not because anybody's asking for it and because there's a pay bonus associated with it, but it's just because it's a demonstration of their real deep care in the work. And then the last thing he talks about is folks being really smart. And I don't mean and I don't mean in the traditional sense of intellectually smart, but in the emotional smart sense. Because when those people come into spaces, understand how people's words and actions impact the dynamics of your ability to drive the work forward, and are, as a result, very thoughtful about those interpersonal dynamics. And I'm talking about this because I actually saw that in your interview process. And I was like, oh, she's not coming in with an ego. She's really talking about, her belief in kids. She's really trying to figure out, I did what I could in higher ed. Now I want to do what I can in the K-12 world. And I don't know the answers. Here's the stuff I do have. I know stuff around what's going to work in higher education and, the work that you did with EOP. But I don't know how it functions, right? You joke about like, it's your language. It's the but that's the level of kind of hunger that really kind of drive that partnership that I think naturally evolved over time. And then honestly, I don't think I've met somebody more intellectually, emotionally savvy than you are. I shared this with you in private setting, but like I've taken a lot of kind of that focus on interpersonal dynamics into my next journey. And it is a very powerful tool, one that I knew always mattered, but it was always kind of the thing you tried to suppress, especially coming to spaces with imposter syndrome, because it's like, you don't want to see people feel. But the more and more I lean into it, it's like, oh, this is actually an asset. And so I give you all like, so I think like that is probably what drew you to me and me to you was being able to see those characteristics and like knowing the opportunity that was there as a result of it. So it just felt natural. And, the fact that you were a Black woman, I think, I don't know that it played a factor into like the way I was approaching you. I think there was more about these virtues that really resonated with.
Thank you. I remember you during my interview too, and I'm like, oh my God, this guy is like super smart and can spit out the data really easy. I don't know if I was, I wouldn't use the word intimidated. I would say, I'm like, oh, I hope that I can be a good partner to him. I hope that I can keep up with him. That's what I remember. So I think that I wanted to really talk to you because this is where people fail.
Yeah.
Right. The relationship with counterparts are vital to getting the work done. And I think one of our secret powers was that we were very like connected on our why. Right. So there was no ego attached to anything that we were doing. I never felt it. And so I'm hoping from this conversation, people can take away like some of the things that we did together and they can apply it to that. Because when you have a great person that you're working alongside, you get to actually just focus on the work. And that's what I really appreciated about our time together. When you think back to our time together as both chiefs in the C-suite, what stands out to you the most about how to work together?
Yeah, I think so. I feel very similar. I think the thing that jumps out to me, I'll give it to you a little bit of the arc of a journey. One of the first things that we started to do was find alignment. And I think that was actually very critical because it was not just alignment around like, what are the technical aspects of how we drive forward? We actually started by having these conversations of like, why are you here? Right? Like, tell me, I think one of the first questions you actually asked me is like, don't tell me about work, tell me about you. Who are you? Right. And, I think in sharing a little bit of that personal story, we kind of found those intersections of sameness and then respected the diversions of difference. Right. And I think that actually helped us kind of connect to be like, oh, here's the place where I can like really kind of lean into the personal connection aspect of it. And I think that naturally kind of gave us a foundation to then evolve that alignment into alignment around not just who we are, but why we're here. What are we doing in the work and what are we helping to achieve? And I don't actually ever think once the conversation of like career aspirations, like the structure of organization, like there was not really a self-driven motivator alignment conversation. I think what I heard very loud and clear about you was like, what are we doing for scholars? What are we doing for students? What are we doing for kids? And then we actually just had hard conversations at the beginning. You actually had conversation of like, I was harmed in some of my previous experiences as a Black woman. And I've talked about some places where I felt kind of either marginalized or othered in those spaces. And I don't know what it was. It could just be where you were honestly in your professional journey to be like, I can talk about this now without it's a pity party. It's just kind of who I am, that I think actually helped create that sense of real strong foundational trust. And then we started talking about, well, how are we going to move about the work together? And I don't think our profiles could be any more different. That's true. I am like wildly analytical, very data driven. But we then talked about like, what does that mean about how we move the work forward, right? The work is also very hard. And in all of it, even of our hardest moments, the joy factor was always there. Whether it was snarky, candid comments in private or in public, or, just getting a moment to vet and decompress so that you can then refocus on the work. We weren't shy about needing that kind of moment of humanity with one another. Because the work is so hard, you have to. And so, that for me, at least, is a very huge intrinsic motivator to keep doing some of the hard stuff. Like, am I actually finding joy in not just the moments, to your point, but like in the big picture? And I think, with you and our collective work all together. The last two pieces I'll say around this is we also weren't myopic. We really did do some big picture ideation. You say it's closer to 3 years, right? But you talk about it like in 3 years, it actually felt like we did map out a 5 to 10 year set of work at Alliance. And I think the kinds of conversations we were having felt appropriate, not just for our titles, but for the level of influence we actually had over the system. It was just really energizing. And it wasn't just about like, what are the outcomes that we're driving towards this year, but like, is actually the kind of culture we're trying to use a lot, right? The kind of culture we're trying to create here, that it honestly lives us.
You are listening to the Do Better with Debra podcast with guest, Chief of Education at College Track, Rudy Elizondo. Make sure you visit dobetterexecutivecoaching.com and learn how you can lean into your power and lead with confidence, purpose, and joy. And now, back to the podcast.
I think that we got to our data points different.
Yeah.
But we're similar in a lot of ways, right? Like you have to have your spreadsheets, and you have to analyze it all. I'm very intuitive. And so my intuition is so strong, and watching people and collecting my data in my own way, right? That I would be able to bring things to you in the discussion that you're like, oh, okay. And you and I would just go back and forth, right? And the challenging is not something that people often feel comfortable with. I think I trusted you right off the bat by your actions. I thought, going back to meeting you at my interview and thinking like how I wanted to show up, because the way that you would word the questions during my interview and the way that you would talk about things might have had me start my role being an imposter. I was very clear. I'm like, I'm going to be me. I don't know all the things he knows because I've never worked in this sector of education before. But I think it's probably the first time I'm really like truly conscious that I'm not entering as an imposter. Do you remember when you stopped acting like an imposter or having to wear that hat at all?
Yeah. There are always like little glimpses, I would say, throughout my professional career, or it was like those moments of lucidity where it's like, oh, I feel strong in my identity, and they kind of push back into the sense of imposter syndrome. So I would say like, it was definitely the build, right? There's a moment where I can authentically say, here's where it stopped. But I think, right, there's ups and downs throughout my life. And as I'm sure it is for most people. But what I can tell you is like, there was a moment where I made a bet on an approach for strategic change where I positioned myself as the owner rather than a collaborator. And that was the moment that kind of shifted the mindset for me. And to get really concrete, it actually happened in my second year of being a CIO, Chief Instructional Officer. I remember before I took on this role, I was actually with Dan and Pablo at a lunch, I believe. And Dan asked me, what would you need to move forward in the CIO role? And I said, I needed time and trust. And what I meant by that was I needed time to create a division, right? A team that would drive academic excellence within an obsessively focused manner, right? And to do so in a way that was hyper-focused on data, it's no surprise, right? But also in a way that was building trust in the way that felt natural to me. That really centered on the development of my people. And that it also involved where I think some of my natural strengths are, which is the ability to kind of zoom in to what is happening with this one individual student and the ability to zoom out to see the bigger picture. And this actually was not my experience in my first year in this role. Transparently, I had a lot of random expectations, a lot of desires to push and drive in ways that actually aligned to who I was as a leader and who I developed as a leader at that time. And, it just felt off. And I share that because there was like a manifestation in my body around that dissonance, right? Like I actually had my first set of panic attacks. I never had that. Like I had weird heart palpitations. I was, feeling off all the time. And, I would ask for clarity. I would ask for partnership. I would ask for like some direction. And I think with all best intentions, it was trying to be given, but it wasn't landing in the way that I needed in the time. And, part of that, I take ownership. It's like, maybe I didn't know what to ask for because I was so mired in that physiological experience. And then, after like a whole year of like losing sleep and going into these really weird moments, I finally was just like, screw it. I'm going to stop doing it the way I think people are asking me to do it. And I'm just going to do it in the way that I shared with Dan and Pablo at the time, which is I need time and trust to do what I want to do, which is create a team that's obsessively focused on the most important things. And when I started to do it, I not only felt physically better in my body and in my soul, it actually made everyone else around me feel better. And, not just about how we feel. The important part to me is like, and then we saw results in our students. And that's actually when I knew that second year, at the end of that second year, when I was like, I'm just going to make a bet. I'm going to ignore all the noise and just lean into the way I think I want to lead. And then we had the benefit of seeing our kids succeed as a result of it. That's when I knew I had something to bring to the table that was uniquely mine. And for me, that is the linchpin moment where I was like, okay, I'm going to plant a flag in the sand here and be like, this is who I am. This is what I bring, and this is the impact that I have, and everything else no longer matters.
Mm-hmm. That makes so much sense to me. And I really resonate with that because I think I have a proven track record, right? So now if somebody's like, that doesn't make sense, why would you do it that way? I'm like, because I know it can work. I'm also not conforming to be anything else than me, which is flawed, which doesn't follow perfection, that tries to show up authentically myself. It allows also other people to know that that's okay. So I think, yeah, that really resonates with me. That's really good.
You are listening to the Do Better with Debra podcast with Dr. Debra Y. Griffith and her very special guest, educator, mentor, and chief of education at College Track, Rudy Elizondo. Make sure you visit dobetterexecutivecoaching.com and learn how you can lean into your power and lead with confidence, purpose, and joy. And now back to the podcast.
You have a superpower, which is, I'm sure you're not going to think this is your superpower, but your ability to listen is like something I've not ever heard. I'm like, oh, wow. His ability to listen and then take a moment and then it's like, okay, this is what Debra's saying, right? Like I'd always say like Rudy gets me because he's able to hear what I'm saying and then spit it out for the others that don't think like me, but will spit it out for the others that think like you, right? How did you develop this like crazy like ability to listen to all types of personalities and leadership styles and be able to translate it into a way that a whole room can make sense of it?
I think some of it is like, there's some technical things that I did that I think help. I think a large part of it is more about the mindset you put yourself when you're actually actively listening. And I'll give you both perspectives. So the technical is I do a lot of writing and whiteboarding, right? And it's not that I'm what I'm writing is the key headlines, key messages, key quotes, key concepts, questions for myself as people are like, it's one of the reasons why I got them remarkable, but I always try to carry a piece of paper or a notebook with me because that writing piece helps me make sure that I'm in the moment, first of all, right? That I'm not wandering or thinking about other things. Some of the technical things that I started to do, once I became a principal and then later down the line in my career, is I started color coding my notes to be like, here are things, like I would give you a quick snapshot, like black is for verbatim things people said. Green would be like connections that I have. Blue would be questions that I would want to seek. Red would be, data points that I think may justify or not. So I started doing some color coding. I had done that so much that then when I was just taking notes, my brain was just drawing those like natural connections because I started to really think about the conversation as a idea generation starter. And there are so many connections that come out of those conversations, right? It's one of the reasons why when you and I oftentimes talk, you'd be like, how do you know who is going to be impacted by this conversation? Like, I'm just writing it down and I'm thinking about it. So it wasn't, I think part of it is experience, but it was also just kind of like a muscle that I had been building over time. The mindset piece is we operate, especially at this level, we operate from this concept that we become very good at handling a high volume of tasks and conversations, right? This false perception that we are great multitaskers. And so when I'm hearing conversations, I legitimately like try to put my laptop away. I put my phone away. I put any of the distractors away because even losing a microsecond of the conversation means you run the risk of losing a massive potential. And so I am very much like ingrained in the moment. I'm listening intently. I will lean in. Like I will do all the things that I physically have to do to make sure that what I am hearing is what the person is intending to share. And that I'm not getting distracted by all the external stuff with this false perception that I am above. My brain can actually think in a different dimension when I'm talking to somebody because it's just not true. And so that kind of proactive, intentive listening, I think does go a long way and it helps me hold on to ideas much better.
That is, wow. Okay. I just learned something new about you today and a new technique. That is wild. So you talked about the whiteboard.
Yeah.
For me to make sense of things, I would often come into your office and say, show me, teach me. And again, I thought it was just so generous that you would do that, right? I have something on my whiteboard right now that you put up there well over a year ago, and I can't let it go because I'm like, well, that's Rudy's teaching. But you never thought about it as teaching.
No, I still don't.
What did you think you were doing?
I thought I was just downloading my brain, honestly. Like the reason I don't think about it as teaching is because teaching, especially in that mentality, has this kind of concept of stand and deliver, right? Like I actually have knowledge to share and your job is to absorb it and just apply it. And, you can't do that at senior leadership levels, right? Otherwise, it's implementers of the work. And nothing wrong with that, but that's not our role, right? We are strategists at our role. And so whiteboarding is really for me to slow myself down transparently and to show the processes, the connections, the implications, thinking of them to actually better entice you to challenge those ideas, to really kind of strengthen my own thinking through that conversation. Because, especially I naturally converse, I can sound very declarative, right? It's like, no, this is what we need to do. And this is how we're, and I think that gives a false sense of confidence in where those ideas are coming from and that there is an answer. And, when you're dealing with humans, as much of our work is, there isn't an answer because there are just so many uncontrollable variables. And so we have to actually force ourselves to think through our potential blind spots, even if we don't know what those blind spots are. And putting it visually out there shows probably for me the greatest level of vulnerability because I'm showing you how I'm making sense of this, not because I this egotistical version of me, like, I don't got to show you anything. This is what it is, right? But the humble one that I think is a greater value add to organizations and to students is the one that's willing to show you where my thinking is, so that there might be opportunities to strengthen misinterpretations and even places that are potentially flawed.
Interesting that your experience of vulnerability, I'm experiencing. I'm like, man, this guy is so generous. He is so generous. I'm used to people just like holding all their stuff to themselves, right? Their like little hacks, how they think or how they got there, and being really like forceful with like, this is just how it is, but not willing to show how it is. And even if you did say like, no, we must do this, you'd be like, okay, no, challenge me though. Like challenge me. So like, again, like, how did you learn to be so generous?
I think it's a misnomer. It's not generosity.
Mm.
Even the way you talk about it, it's there's something there around, why are you perceiving it as generosity, right?
Mm.
It's actually the free exchange of ideas. It's what we want in our schools. It's what in higher ed. It's honestly what we want in society, right? It's not about like who's right or wrong. It's already making sense of all the tension points, all the trade-offs, all the opportunities, and all the gaps that we're going to produce. On it ideologically, I'm like, I wish everything could be like that. So it didn't have to be so charged. This kind of hoarding ideas or hoarding knowledge. I'm like, who does that actually benefit? I'm like, you want to know how I figure something out? First of all, it's not my first version of it, right? Like, I have plenty of organization tools, and I have a whole bookshelf and hard drives full of all the things that didn't work. So part of like showing the knowledge, showing the process is like, it's also a recognition that it's iterative. It goes through phases, right? It goes through evolutions. There are things that work now that won't work a year from now. And so being able to say that out loud also, I think, diffuses this perception of like everyone is perfect, right? Or folks are put on a pedestal. There is work that happened to get people there. Just like for me, there was work that happened to even get me to that place. And you just happened to come in at the end of a specific part of my own professional journey.
So education can feel the same across systems, right? K through 12, higher ed, politics, egos, white supremacy, broken structures. How do you stay grounded in 2025 and protect your peace amongst all of that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it actually goes back to like the very beginning of our conversation, right? Where we talk about like the why will we do this work. And so ultimately, I think we don't get me wrong, this moment in time feels very different than other moments in time, but not so different that it feels like we're not equipped to handle it. And, we tend to oversimplify history to be kind of this straight line of progression, where we're just getting better year over year, but it really is more stochastic, where you'll down, up and down, up and down. And every moment you zoom in, there's a win. And every moment you zoom in, there's a challenge. And so part of what I do to stay grounded is, yes, I have to stay to like what is happening now. And you also have to zoom out to look at the bigger picture. Like, is this actually taking away the entirety of the reason why I do this work? And that second question, the answer is always no, right? It forces me to think is like, how can I still do my work even in the midst of all this? And that helps me keep grounded, right? Because again, if you've heard nothing from this theme, it's like, I'm constantly thinking about how to iterate and improve and get better and challenge my own ideas. And if you get stagnant, if you live in this place of like, we're up against a barrier that is uncrossable, right? Or man, the world is so screwed up that there's nothing we can do that's going to benefit us, then we've actually lost the battle. For me, it's really about understanding what we are in this moment, but also looking at the bigger picture and really challenging myself to be creative about how do we operate even within this moment when you're looking at the bigger picture. I'm here to make sure that students have opportunities, and that's all.
In the last through years, how do you feel like you've grown the most as a leader?
I mean, I think that the biggest personal change has probably been my willingness to kind of share a lot more of the whole Rudy, right? The whole self. I've leaned in a lot more into my personal story, my personal journey, making sure people understand the why of why I'm doing certain things, the why of which I move about the world. And I think that, especially when you think about what first impressions can be, where it's like, you're really polished, you have this very data-centered view, you're like, could be dating in some places. That kind of openness, I think, helps people. My hope is it helps people enter into conversations to really ask not, why are you like this, but more about like, how have you developed into this? And so that personal journey part, I think, has been really one of the more challenging things I've done, honestly. And it sounds weird to say it because it's like, but has it really impacted your ability to accomplish your work? And my answer is like, absolutely. You can do a lot more you can do a lot more when you lean into that part of your leadership. So that's one aspect. I think the other aspect, honestly, it connects a little bit to the imposter syndrome question that you asked me, is also leaning into the things that I know how to do, but recognizing that you are not supposed to be, nor should you ever think you are the smartest person in the room, and recognizing that those gaps have to be covered by other people that bring both diversity of perspective, but also diversity of strengths. And those people you manage to surpass, go further as you in your impact in their career, in their futures, that's actually a win, right? So like, it's a little bit of the analogy you gave of like crabs fighting in the bucket. If every person that I interact with ends up becoming a high-powered CEO somewhere else, or a high-powered VP, or a massive influencer in the educational or public sector, I'm like, oh, I helped with that, and that's their journey. And so, further leaning into that lack of ego, I think, is really important.
Mm-hmm. My last question, I like to think about, especially if you think about your trajectory in your career and the lessons that you've learned and the scars that you've gained. If you think about your journey and next generation of teachers walk into the classroom, or directors or managers of some sector in higher ed or K through 12, or a seat at the table of a C-suite, what's one lesson that you have learned that you'd want to share with them?
Yeah. It would probably be to focus on the impact you can have now, not the impact you can have later. And what I mean by that is and I get it for good reasons, there's a lot of focus on like career promotion, right? Like a lot of like, what's next? I've outlived this. I've been in this role for 2 years, for 3 years. I'm ready to move on to the next thing, and I get the external motivators around that, right? Like compensation and being able to, be your own boss. By the way, you're never your own boss, but
Great deal.
I get all those aspects of the external motivators, but I think when we overly rely or overly focus on those external motivators, we actually lose sight of the why of why we're doing the work now, and the impact, and really like the influence we have in our current roles. And the reality is, if you really spend your time and energy like focusing on your impact and your influence and where you sit, the career will happen, right? And so, I think about it when I was a teacher, and I was like, I'm just going to run a really good class. And then, I started to show administration, the teachers doing the class, like, that created enough momentum to be like, oh, maybe you should start coaching, right? And so, I'm not saying don't have dreams. It's not what I'm saying. I want to be clear about that. But what I am saying is like, really hone in on the impact and the influence that you have now, because that ultimately is probably the best leadership lesson you can learn, which is how do you influence without positional authority, right? How do you change without a title? Learn that lesson. Titles don't matter anymore. right? But your scope of impact will.
Well, I'll miss you forever because I had my time with you, but still teaching me and I'm still learning from you. And I just really always want you to know how much of an impact you had the time that we had together. And I'm glad we're still friends.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So many gems. When those relationships work, they really, really work. As you can see, the themes of like trust, setting down the ego, being really centered on our why. Like we have the same why, that we can celebrate the expertise, the strategy, the approach of each other, which is very different, but really similar in a lot of ways. It just works. I want that for all teams. I want that for all co-partners in the work that you're doing. Because when you have that, you're not wasting time on that relationship and building and healing and trying to figure out, did you need this? Did you need that? We didn't waste any time on that. We were just centered on doing the best work and uplifting each other. My conversation really reminded me that leadership isn't about ego. That it's about trust, generosity, and creating the kind of partnerships that make us all stronger. So I want to say, thanks for listening to another episode of Do Better with Debra. If this episode spoke to you, share it with somebody that could use the gems that we shared today. Until next time, let's keep doing better on purpose.
Thank you for listening to educator, mentor, and Chief of Education at College Track, Rudy Elizondo. You can find Mr. Elizondo on LinkedIn, and please visit collegetrack.org for more information. If you enjoyed this episode, follow the show, leave a rating or review, and share with a friend or colleague. You can always find Do Better with Debra on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and coming soon to YouTube.